Okay, this is our last podcast for this particular unit. We'll have a little bit of physics before we finish the term. And of course, this is that difficult story of reproduction, always difficult with students, particularly Year 9 students. So clearly we talked about the requirements of life. And that final thing is the ability to reproduce, to create new cells, as we do through mitosis, or to, in fact, reproduce the whole organism. So a species' success is measured in its ability to keep producing new generations of the species. And the simplest way is through asexual reproduction. So the new individual is produced by mitosis and is therefore identical to the parent. Now it's quick, but it's not much good for evolution because you're not getting opportunities for lots of mutations and change. And so some of these plants and animals that use this are at risk of becoming extinct more quickly than those who use sexual reproduction, for instance. So we use things like fission. So essentially the cell uses mitosis, or a form of mitosis called binary fission, to produce two identical cells. And they bud off like amoeba do and swim away and off they go. Budding's like fission. In this case, the new cell actually just grows off the side of the parent cell and breaks off and off it goes. Fragmentation, again, a bit like fission. This occurs more in multicellular organisms rather than single-celled organisms, and essentially just a piece breaks off and it can grow and develop a new individual. We see this in sea stars, and one of the problems with the Northern Pacific sea star in Port Phillip Bay is the fact that you break a leg off and it just grows a new body, and you can't kill them that way. You really need to bring them out of the water and make them dry out and desiccate to kill them. So much harder to control, but a good strategy for the animal to respond quickly to change in the environment. Some plants produce spores, so a bit like a seed, but they've been produced by mitosis rather than meiosis, so that there's still an identical copy of the plant. We have vegetative reproduction, so you can actually take a leaf and grow a new plant, so the idea of cuttings. And in the case of some really less evolved animals like insects, lizards, and birds, we see this idea of parthenogenesis. So it's actually cloning. Rather than producing a new animal from egg and sperm, the egg is produced in the absence of fertilization and still becomes a new individual. It's not uncommon. It's reasonably rare, but not uncommon in lower evolved forms of animals. That leads us, of course, to sexual reproduction. And sexual reproduction is really important because it allows us to take a set of chromosomes from one parent and mix them from a set of chromosomes from the other parent and cause newness, this new collection of genes that causes change. And so we can evolve quite quickly with lots of change. We talked about mitosis yonks ago now. So essentially what we've got here is a parent cell. The parent cell copies itself through the whole cell replication cycle, goes through prophase 1, metaphase 1, anaphase 1, telophase 1, and we now have two identical daughter cells, identical to the parent. But then, rather than going through growth 1, synthesis, and growth 2 again, it switches back into prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase, and we end up with 4 cells that now only have one set of chromosomes. So these are the sex cells. These are sperm and egg in mammals, or pollen and ovules in plants. But now we need to find a way of mixing them together. So sexual reproduction requires a gamete, this idea of a sperm or an egg, and it needs to be able to fertilize the matching gamete, and that therefore needs some way of getting the two lots of cells together. Evolution relies on sexual reproduction because it allows us so much more change so much more quickly. Like obviously in a male we find the penis has been evolved for the purposes of delivering sperm to the egg, and in humans, like this human here, we're looking at an erect penis being able to be inserted into a vagina and deliver sperm deep inside the vagina near the cervix, so they can swim in that wet environment into the wet environment of the uterus, into the wet environment of the fallopian tube, and they must find the egg in the fallopian tube if fertilization is to occur. So sperm made here in the testes by meiosis. They're stored in the epididymis and slightly matured here, but they're not mature yet, so we can't actually sample for IVF sperm from the testes. We need to, in fact, collect them via, well, obviously via masturbation. So the sperm travel along the vas deferens and come into here where they come across the seminal vesicle and then the prostate gland. And the chemicals that are applied here give it the sperm a medium to swim in, but those chemicals also cause them now to mature. And therefore, oops, we lost it again. We travel down the vas deferens, now what's called the urethra, and out through the glands, which is a huge head of nerve endings for causing erection. Obviously, a flaccid penis like this one here is of little value for sex because you can't deliver the sperm deep into the vagina. So, female form of the human, here's the labia, which is essentially the scrotum of the male, or maybe the scrotum is the labia of the female. The female probably came first, got more DNA. And the penis needs to be inserted here through the vagina, delivering the sperm high in the vagina near the cervix. If the female is orgasming, then you have a wonderful wave of muscle contractions which draw the sperm into the uterus. But we need the sperm to find their way through the fallopian tubes because the egg needs to be met. The egg leaves the ovary here, travels down the fallopian tube. It needs to be found here by the sperm for fertilization to occur. If the egg reaches the uterus before it meets sperm, then it becomes gets a hard shell around it and it won't accept the sperm. The clitoris here is the same tissue as we found in the glands of the penis, and again it's full of nerves, and it causes the linings of the vagina to become wet and lubricated for the less pain for sex, and obviously also causes the ability of these muscle contractions for the uterus to draw the sperm up. So these are important parts of the process. When we start talking about sexual reproduction, of course, not everyone can be successful with sexual reproduction, and sometimes we like to control what we put together, particularly when we're breeding animals. One of those interesting conversations we'll probably have in class is the ability for people to do the same thing, although at this point in time it's not legal because we see it as unethical. But we can collect, we can check the condition of a baby through amniocentesis or chorionic villus sampling. This is through the wall of the uterus. This is up through the cervix. And we might be doing that to see whether there's any genetic malformations that need to be dealt with. In vitro fertilization allows us to give the female lots of hormones to create lots of eggs, then harvest those eggs with a needle, sort of a suction tube if you like, and put those with the sperm of the sperm donor, whether it's the male, the father, or the father can't make sperm of his own, you might have got a sperm donor. If the female can't make eggs of her own, you might get an egg donor. And we put these together and we call this artificial insemination, and then we can implant that back into the woman's uterus. If her uterus is no good, that's not holding babies, then we can actually get a surrogate uterus to put the sperm and egg of the parents in, or the embryo that they've formed. I've written those things there. So it starts to develop. We talk about the original group of cells being a zygote. It implants itself on uterus, and we call this then the blastocyst. And it's about 16 cells large. At this point in time, if it divides, it can form twins, identical twins, because we've got one sperm, one egg, they share the same DNA, and they become two 8-cell individuals and develop into full humans for that purpose. The embryo then develops into that early growth period. We then lay down what's known as the ectoderm, the outside skin, the endoderm, and the mesoderm. So with 3 layers essentially as organisms, and then we call the later growth the fetus. So it's here in the diagram is definitely a fetus, not far from birth. And then of course, as we leave the womb, when we are born, the mother goes through lactation. She produces milk because we are mammals. We have mammary glands that are there for that purpose, and the child suckles. So through early childhood, there's not a lot of difference, not a lot of obvious difference between a male and a female. Clearly, a male naked will show a penis, but if we had them back to back, we can only see their backs, we wouldn't be able to really tell which was a girl, which was a boy. But then through puberty and adolescence, the girls start that earlier, and we move into those mature female bodies. So by the time a female is around 18 years of age, she's basically a mature female. The males stay a little bit longer, and into their early 20s they form their mature male body. And of course we have adulthood and eventually the decrepitude of poor old fellows like me in old age. No, not quite. Still middle age, I hope, for a bit longer. Plants also use sex. Plants use a range of ways of producing new individuals, but they also use sex. And the flowers are their sex organs. So in the middle of the flower you find the ovary. You may find the pollen producing anthers in the same flower as the ovary. And these pollen here would enter the top of the stigma and they work their way down the stigma to the ovules and the ovary becomes a fruit. So when you eat an apple, you're actually eating the ovary of that flower that's developed into a fruit that contains the seeds. And that fruit's there to reward you for taking the fruit and doing your poo somewhere else and spreading the seeds around. So the male parts of flowers are known as stamen, with the filament, this little anther here producing the pollen, the male gamete, and the female is known as the stigma, with her ovules in the bottom of that stigma, which becomes the ovary of the plant. And that's reproduction. I'm sure it'll take a lot longer in class when we talk about it, and you'll have lots of wonderful questions, which I'm more than happy to answer. And I'll see you next week.